And now it's time for us to discuss more of these headlines and simple keywords with Adam joining us via Zoom. Good morning, Adam.
Good morning, Lena. Happy Tuesday.
Happy Tuesday. It's drizzling outside. Does it feel like home?
Yes, I know what you're implying there. It's been a while since I've been back to the UK, but yes, it is notorious for being very rainy. Something I don't miss about the UK, but yeah.
I saw Peter Bent hosting a show where he took a select few celebrities back to the UK, and
I saw that as well.
It was raining, and he said, "This is very iconically British," and I thought, sure.
Yeah, I mean, what's the UK without rain?
And tea.
There's all this talk about climate change and how weather's changing across the years. The UK doesn't seem to be getting rid of any rain, so there are no changes there apparently.
Some things stay exactly the same. All right, let's get started with keyword news. We're going to try to clarify some major headlines for our listener, starting with our first pick of the day.
Suspending suspensions.
Nicely done. So the government has decided not to suspend the medical licenses of resident doctors who haven't returned to their hospitals yet. Now, the suspensions were to take place beginning today, but are now on hold. So this heightened pressure from professors, is it working? Questions remain. A lot of, I think, speed bumps remain to work out a resolution, too. What's the latest, Adam?
Yeah, so this is some might say a little bit of an olive branch, but others are a bit skeptical, saying don't read too much into it. We still don't know. It's going to be a tough road ahead. Now, an unnamed official from the presidential office told Yonhap News that things are on hold temporarily. The official said the government cannot carry out license suspensions while trying to engage in dialogue with the medical community. They think is a bit counterproductive. Now, over the past several days, the government has been softening its hardline stance somewhat. On Sunday, for example, President Yoon asked Prime Minister Han Duck-soo for flexible measures, we mentioned this yesterday, to resolve the dispute and to create a constructive discussion group with the medical community so that they can sit down for talks. The medical community says it is willing to talk, but with conditions, of course. Now, it wants the government to completely scrap its medical quota plan, something the government has ruled out. So some difficulties already a hurdle there. For starters, before the talks even begin. Meanwhile, the Korean Medical Association elects a new president today. It's conducting a vote which ends at 6 p.m. Today. Candidates Im Hyun-taek, the president of the Korean Pediatric Society, and Chu Soo-ho, former KMA president, and also the chairman of the KMA's Emergency Response Committee, are competing. Both candidates are firmly against the government's plan, indicating that regardless of the election outcome, a tough stance against the government will continue. Now, negotiations with the government appear challenging due to their hardline positions. Im argues for reducing the number of medical students and demands the dismissal of the vice health minister as a precondition for negotiations. Chu also insists that the increase in medical students should be re-examined and sees no need for dialogue with the government at all. So already before such talks begin, it seems like there's a lot of hurdles to overcome. So what good will these talks do if they do take place is a question that's being raised. But the license suspensions, nonetheless, have been put on hold for the time being. So what does that soften the stance of the other side of the medical community as well? Remains to be seen. But there you have it.
All right, we'll wait and see. Let's move on to our second keyword of the day.
Special cities.
So President Yoon Suk-yeol vowed Monday to push for legislation that will grant more autonomy to 4 so-called special cities, including Yongin and Suwon. These provinces and these cities seem to have at least a population of 1 million, and they want to ensure that these cities have more autonomy. So what's the plan?
Yeah, so these cities are kind of being touted as, up-and-coming cities. They are largely populated. They're close to the capital, bar one. They are Yongin, Suwon, and Goyang in Gyeonggi Province, and Changwon in South Gyeongsang Province. Now, these 4 cities have lower-level local autonomy, but they do have populations of over 1 million. Now, Yoon says the new law, if proposed, will ensure the administrative power of a provincial governor in these cities to be transferred to the city's mayors. Now, with the new legislation, the mayor of each of these cities would have the power to permit the construction of buildings with 51 stories or taller, for example, and the renovation of residential complexes to accommodate more households, as well as the creation of gardens and other sort of infrastructure. Now, currently, the mayor of these cities are not authorized to give permission to such projects without approval from the governor of the province in which the city is located. So, Seoul, for example, is a special city. In Korea, we say Seoul 특별시, which literally means special city. It means it gives more autonomy to the mayor of the city. And so the Yoon administration wants the same to be done with these four cities. Now, Yoon said the new special law will lay the groundwork for the mayors to nurture the city's strategic industry and map out its urban development plan. He also said special support will be given to Yongin, especially as well. He was speaking in Yongin in another one of these public government debates. Now, he promised to back major infrastructure projects to support a semiconductor cluster centered on Yongin with an investment commitment of 500 trillion won. This includes a so-called semiconductor expressway stretching across the cities of Yongin, Hwaseong, and Ansang. A new semiconductor high school also open in Yongin as well to support the chip ecosystem in the area. So we could have our own version of the US's Silicon Valley in Yongin. We'll have to see how much progress it makes, but that is the pledge anyway.
All right, with that, move on to our third keyword of the day.
Korea Study Group.
So President Yoon has met with the U.S. House's Korea Study Group during their visit to Seoul. Do we know what they discussed?
Right, so this meeting was to discuss how the cooperation between Korean and American companies is helping both countries grow economically. Yoon asked the members to support Korean businesses operating in the U.S., and he also asked them to help Korean experts and young people as well work in the US by passing a law that would make more visas available to them. And he also asked for their continued support to strengthen the alliance between South Korea and the US. Now, the CSGK, for short, responded by saying the US Congress supports the Korea-US alliance across all parties. They promised to lead efforts in passing important laws for Korea and to work hard for the alliance's growth. They also praised the alliance for keeping North Korea's threats in check and for working together globally to ensure freedom, peace, and prosperity. They also congratulated South Korea for hosting a successful democracy summit recently. That's something that we covered in this segment as well. Now, for those who don't know what the Korea Study Group is, it is a team in the US Congress that studies issues related to South Korea, as the name suggests, and it started in February 2018. It has about 80 members from both the House and Senate. So another body or group, if you will, to kind of strengthen the alliance between the two countries. So, yeah.
During their stay, it seems that the group also met with unification foreign and defense ministers particularly. What did they discuss?
Right, so similar kind of comments came out from these meetings, but Defense Minister Shin Won-sik thanked US Congress for their support. He said they helped emphasize the maintenance of US forces in Korea and the US's extended deterrence commitments. The delegation promised bipartisan support to further strengthen the alliance. Unification Minister Kim Yong-ho asked for the US lawmakers' bipartisan cooperation and support for South Korea's efforts to seek a peaceful unification with North Korea. Foreign Minister Cho Tae-yeol also met with the delegation and urged their continued attention on the Korean peninsula. He also expressed concerns about expanding North Korea-Russia cooperation beyond military to political and economic areas. And he emphasized the need for stronger sanctions against North Korea as well, while trying to achieve that peaceful unification.
And with that, we move on to our fourth keyword of the day.
Japan-North Korea summit.
So prospects of a summit between the leaders of Japan and North Korea are being raised again, but by which side, under what conditions? None of that is ironed out. Now, Kim Yo-jong, the sister of the regime's leader, claimed Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida has relayed hopes for a meeting with Kim Jong-un in the near future. Can you tell us the details?
Yeah, so, of course, do take this with a grain of salt. So this is coming from the regime. I think it's a bit of an exaggeration of what Kishida was saying. That is the consensus, or sort of the view, anyway, of pundits. Now, in a statement released by the regime state media, she said improving their bilateral relations depends on Japan's political determination, in her words. She added, there'll be no breakthroughs as long as the Kishida administration brings up the issue of Japanese citizens abducted to North Korea. Now, when asked about the report, Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida said in a parliamentary session that he has always thought a summit would be important to resolve various issues, including that abduction issue. But he stressed that no final decision has been made yet. So he hasn't outrightly rejected the prospects of a summit with Kim Jong-un, but he's not expressed any openness to it as well. But Kim Yo-jong's latest comments come a month after she said North Korea is open to enhancing ties with Tokyo, even inviting Kishida to Pyongyang, something we mentioned before in this segment as well. Now, pundits say Pyongyang aims to use the summit to weaken the trilateral relationship between Seoul, Tokyo, and Washington, and eventually use the meeting as a kind of stepping stone for a summit with the US. So not rather than directly approaching the US for a summit for talks, kind of, taking around a more circular route, if you will. Now, if the summit takes place, it would be the first time in more than 20 years that the leaders of North Korea and Japan meet. The South Korean government said that it is closely communicating with Japan regarding the claims made by Kim Yo-jong. So it doesn't seem an outright rejection, but not welcoming it with open arms either. So we'll have to see how this develops. But it is something that could come into fruition. We'll have to see. So watch this space, I guess.
But it seems that both sides have a different idea of what the contingencies are. Now, Seoul's foreign ministry says it's closely communicating with Japan to keep up with the matter. So we'll wait and see. Our final keyword of the day.
Ceasefire resolution.
So UN Security Council has called for an immediate ceasefire in the Gaza Strip. This comes after the United States did not veto the measure in a shift from its previous position. They abstained from voting. What's the latest?
Yeah, so not a vote for, they just didn't veto and don't vote at all. So it is a shift from the previous position, but a kind of cautious one at the same time, more diplomatic one, I guess. Now, the UNSC resolution also actually demanded the immediate and unconditional release of all hostages. It is the first time the Council has called for a ceasefire since the war began in October. After several failed attempts, the US, as you said, abstains. The remaining 14 members voted in favor. Now, the move by the US signals growing divergence between it and its ally Israel over Israel's offensive in Gaza, and in highlighting this, an unusually strong rebuke from the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Its office said the US had abandoned its previous position, which had directly linked a ceasefire to a hostage release. The statement said this harmed efforts to release hostages by giving Hamas hope it could use international pressure on Israel to achieve a ceasefire without freeing the captives. And it also said Netanyahu had decided to cancel meetings between an Israeli delegation and US officials in Washington that were scheduled for this week. So will this cause a rift in their friendly ties? Now, Israel's defense minister also said Israel would not stop the war in Gaza while hostages were still being held there. Of course, a UN resolution is not a kind of a legally binding clause, if you will. So Israel does have a right to refuse adhering to the calls made in the resolution. The Palestinian representative to the UN, Riyad Mansour, welcomed the resolution, though, but said it was overdue. The US National Security Council spokesman John Kirby said the US's decision to let the resolution pass did not mean a shift in US policy. He said the US backed a ceasefire but did not vote in favor of the resolution because the text did not condemn Hamas. So that's the reason given by Washington for not voting in favor and abstaining instead. But of course, eyes are on what this means for the relations between the US and Israel. So that is a talking point, because of course they do have friendly ties. It's what is best widely known. But how this kind of fracture in ties, if you will, if there is one, will play out in terms of the actual conflict on the Gaza Strip and what both sides are willing to do in terms of it.
And that's probably the most important part of that story. But also, there's a political angle to this, too. I mean, you want to talk about Joe Biden's depleting popularity ever since the war broke out on the Gaza Strip. That also comes into question, too. Does he need this to essentially woo younger voters who are not very happy about the U.S. stance on the Gaza Strip? So we'll wait and see. We run out of time, as always.
As always.
Very ambitious to cover all these stories, but thank you anyway. We'll see you tomorrow, Adam.
You're very welcome. I'll see you tomorrow.
If you're listening to our program using the podcast service, just a reminder that we do go live Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. Korea Standard Time. So tune in and help us make the show more informative by giving us your input. See you bright and early on Good Morning Seoul.